The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, as previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 10132, the Federal Agency Performance Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 10132, the Federal Agency Performance Act, a bill to improve performance and accountability in the federal government and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 10132 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. I support the Federal Agency Performance Act of 2024, which provides additional transparency, accountability, and priorities for the federal government. Federal agencies have many different missions. To meet these missions, they are required to develop goals and objectives. Developing the goal is an important first step towards progress. However, we know that more must be done to ensure that these goals and objectives are being achieved. The Government Performance and Results Act of 1993 is later modernized in 2010 by a reform act known as GPRAMA, collectively established a solid foundation of reforms to improve the overall performance and outcomes of federal agencies. GPRAMA addressed a number of issues such as focusing attention on cross-cutting management issues, enhancing the usefulness of performance information, increasing transparency, and ensuring leadership commitment and attention to improving the performance of federal agencies. H.R. 10132 builds upon existing law to codify the performance management practices that have shown the most positive results. This bill requires agencies to proactively assess their progress towards achieving their strategic goals and objectives. It ensures that merely developing the goal is not enough. Agencies would be required to track their progress and develop plans to address identified risks to not achieving their stated goals. This bill also requires agencies to determine whether they need more evidence to better assess their progress. Agencies would also be required to assign senior leadership attention to completing these efforts, a common sense reform that ensures that the work gets done. I'd like to thank committee members William Timmons and Ro Khanna for leading this bill in the House of Representatives. I urge my colleagues to support this important, sensible, and bipartisan legislation. I now recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and thanks to our colleagues, Mr. Timmons and Mr. Khanna, for leading this bill to modernize the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993, which I thought we referred to as GPRA, not GPRAMA. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably right.
But I'm pleased to support the legislation. I want to thank the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee Chairman Gary Peters for his leadership over on the Senate side. GPRA first established a performance management framework for government agencies and was last modernized in 2010. So we're definitely overdue for another look to make sure that the framework is operating as effectively and efficiently as it can. The Federal Agency Performance Act would codify OMB's practice of conducting regular strategic reviews of federal agency performance goals and ensure that all priority goals are tied explicitly to the President's budget with milestones that can be achieved within a single presidential term. It would also set new requirements to improve publicly available data on performance.gov, allowing greater transparency into agency progress. Additionally, it would require each government-wide priority goal to be led by at least one OMB official and one agency official. The bill makes other common-sense updates to ensure federal agencies are providing services to the American people as efficiently as possible. I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, you're bringing this up for a vote today and encourage my colleagues to support the legislative handiwork of Mr. Timmons and Mr. Khanna. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Correctly pronouncing acronyms is not my strong suit, so I'm sure you're right. Chair now recognizes Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank Mr. Khanna for partnering with me on this important legislation. Today, I rise in favor of H.R. 10132, the Federal Agency Performance Act of 2024. If enacted, this legislation would hold federal agencies more accountable for their performance and ensure greater transparency in how they spend taxpayer dollars. The Government Performance and Results Modernization Act of 2010 already made significant reforms to improve agency performance outcomes. This bill builds on those reforms by adding new, proven practices that will deliver even better results. Specifically, the bill requires agencies to develop strategic plans for how taxpayer money should be spent. And just as importantly, it forces agency employees to report their progress toward achieving their goals. Agencies will also need to assess the risks that could prevent them from meeting those goals and put in place strategies to address those risks. By establishing a more rigorous strategic review process, improving access to publicly available data, and incorporating evidence-based activities into planning, we create a stronger framework for how taxpayer money is spent. This will lead to greater transparency and accountability for both government-wide and agency-specific performance goals. The Federal Agency Performance Act of 2024 also incorporates key recommendations from the Government Accountability Office, which advocates for a more comprehensive approach to planning and management in the federal government. It also codifies a success benchmark by requiring annual strategic reviews of each agency's priority goals. These reviews are essential, helping leadership focus on top-level objectives and ensure that we stay on track. As members of the Oversight Committee, it is our responsibility to protect taxpayer dollars from waste, fraud, and abuse. This bill takes an important step in establishing the guardrails needed to ensure government spending is efficient and effective while rooting out wasteful practices within our federal agencies. An identical version of this legislation unanimously passed the Senate in February, and I hope this body will soon follow. I urge all my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation, which codifies practices that have proven to encourage greater transparency, accountability, and improve agency performance. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
The sponsor of the bill yields back. Do any other members wish to be heard? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 10132 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, chair recognizes Mr. Biggs.
I request a roll call, recorded vote.
A recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Biggs from Arizona. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 10155, the Financial Management Risk Reduction. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 10155, the Financial Management Risk Reduction Act, a bill to amend Section 7504 of Title 31 United States Code to improve the single audit requirements.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 10155 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. I support the Financial Management Risk Reduction Act of 2024, which will improve the quality and completeness of financial audit data of large federal grant recipients. If an entity receives a federal financial assistance from the federal government, we should be able to closely review their financial statements and expenditures of federal funds to ensure that every transaction is legitimate. The law requires that non-federal entities that receive more than $300,000 in federal awards annually undergo this close review, otherwise known as a financial single audit. Unfortunately, long-standing issues prevent efforts from identifying recipients that should have submitted a single audit but did not. Even more troubling, the Office of Management and Budget has not designated any entity to conduct a government-wide single audit quality check since 2007. Why is this important? For example, trillions of dollars of COVID-19 related financial assistance was distributed in many cases to first-time award recipients who were non-federal entities. The recipients were receiving substantial sums of federal funds that needed this oversight. Routine government-wide reviews of these audits is important to ensure the information is both reliable and useful, which in turn helps the agency officials monitor the spending of these federal dollars. Data is important, but having the right analytical tools to use this data is important too. H.R. 10155 will require the development of these analytic tools to use this data to identify fraud risks across the government. Rather than waiting to find out that there are pervasive or severe issues with the use of federal financial assistance funds, the federal government should be proactive in identifying and addressing any issues. This bill will also target effectiveness. The bill includes a requirement for the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, to review the effectiveness of strategies and tools that come from these government-wide reviews. It also calls for an assessment of the reporting burdens for these auditors and audited entities. Lastly, the bill asks GAO to evaluate the responsiveness of the federal agencies to the finding of these audits. This holds them accountable. I want to thank committee member Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia for leading this bill in the House of Representatives. I urge my colleagues to support this sensible reform. I now recognize Ranking Member Raskin for his statement. This is...
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I am pleased to support this legislation, which would indeed improve the quality and usability of independent audit data and enhance oversight of federal funds. The Single Audit Act of 1984 requires federal grant recipients who get more than $750,000 to report an independent audit of their internal financial controls annually to the government. It sought to increase accountability while reducing burden on grant recipients by mandating one single consolidated audit rather than audits on a grant-by-grant basis. In 2022, over 40,000 state, local, tribal, and territorial governments and not-for-profits submitted single audits. The Financial Management Risk Reduction Act addresses recommendations made by the GAO, which were aimed at increasing the usability of single audit information to reduce federal financial management risk. The bill codifies certain portions of OMB's Uniform Grants Guidance, requiring agencies to conduct quality control reviews on its audits, and directs OMB to coordinate a government-wide audit quality review once every 6 years. Finally, the bill would direct OMB to create a government-wide strategy on financial risk regarding single audits and instructs GSA to create analytical tools to use single audit data more effectively. It's a good bill. It will improve the quality and accessibility of audit data. It will increase transparency and accountability of federal funds. I urge all of our colleagues to support it. I yield back.
Do any other members wish to be heard? The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signifying by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 10155 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signifying by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I request
Oh,
a recorded vote.
I record